Okay, so I'm back, and Terrapin wisely or unwisely gave me a little bit more time to talk. And what they asked me to talk about was the world of big data and where customer loyalty and customer loyalty management and loyalty marketing, where it all fits into the world of big data. So I'm thinking to myself, as I'm waiting for the presentation to come up, that's a pretty big topic, right? Not sure exactly what big data means or where we fit into it. And as I'm putting the presentation together last night, trying to come up with something to say, I thought, one of the first things we're going to have to do is try to figure out what big data is. So I spent some time thinking about that. What is big data? It sounds kind of big brotherish, right? Sounds like there's a lot of work and a lot of analysis involved, and it sounds pretty expensive. And it really is kind of an intimidating topic, but although I joke about putting the presentation together last night, that's not a joke, by the way. The truth is that our business, the business that my company is in, Aimia, we're a global leader in loyalty management, and the survival of our business depends on understanding how the world of customer loyalty fits into the world of big data. So when you think about the idea of convergence, and over the past couple of decades, we've witnessed telephony and personal computing and media all merge into the smartphone, right? We just went through that wave of convergence, and we saw what that's done to many legacy business models. There's another wave of convergence coming, and it's the convergence of the payments industry with big data, with customer loyalty and management services. That's all coming. So we're going to be a part of that, and if we don't figure out this question, figure out where we play in this world, we won't be around. That's the stark truth of it. So this is a very important question for us. So we spend a lot of time thinking about it, and I'm not going to say that I've got the answer figured out, but I put kind of an argument together, kind of outlining how we can play in this world. And I'm interested in walking you guys through it because it's something that we're learning about right now. So as much as we might think we have it figured out, we talk about creative destruction and the idea of new technology and new market forces coming in and destroying old business models. We used to measure creative destruction in years. Well, now we measure it in months, right? 6 months from now, some new technology or startup could come in and completely upend our business models and everything that we now think is true, right? So as we walk through this argument, I think it's important to understand that it's always going to be a work in progress, and we're all together going to try to figure out where we fit into this world. So the first question is, what is big data? So I did some digging. A lot of people talking about big data. One of the guys that I like to hear talk about it is this gentleman. His name is Hal Varian, and he is Google's chief economist. He's also a professor at MIT. And he kind of articulated the change that was coming really about 5 or 6 years ago. He gave a talk, an interview in Wired magazine, and he said that the sexiest job in the next 10 years will be statistician, right? So I don't know if there are any statisticians or analysts in the audience today, but if you are one, your dance card is going to be full, right? People are going to want to be your friend because, as we'll see in a bit, there's a shortage of necessary skills involved to do this work. So that was kind of interesting. I think that's probably true. Another person that had some interesting things to say about it was the European Consumer Commissioner. Her name is Meglena Kuvena, and she works for the EU. She's a European Consumer Commissioner. She's in charge of making sure that consumer marketing practices in the EU are above board and ethical. And her organization released a report with Bain Capital called Data, the Emergence of a New Asset Class, came out a couple years ago. And in this paper, she coined the phrase, I don't know why that happens, but hopefully it will stop soon, that the personal data is the new oil of the internet and the new currency of the digital world. So this idea of data as the new oil is pretty interesting, right? We talk a lot about that at Aimia. The idea that consumer information is actually something that has tangible value and is an asset to an organization, but it has to be extracted, it has to be refined, it has to be processed, and then it has to be delivered in the form of value back to a consumer. So that's kind of interesting. So a lot of big people with big brains, bigger brains than mine, are talking about this topic, trying to figure it out. But here's just some scary stats to throw at you, because it's always interesting to throw out a lot of scary stats to freak everybody out. So when you think about the number of emails that come out every day, 47 billion emails are sent in the US alone every day. Think about social media, Twitter, 95 million tweets flying around the world every day. You think about Facebook, 30 billion Facebook posts every day. So there's a lot of these stats that you can throw out, right, to scare everybody. But then you start to add all this up into the volume of data that is flowing around the world. And I just looked up some of these numbers a couple weeks ago, and they're seriously mind-blowing. They're just completely, you can't even comprehend how much data is flowing. So this map is kind of interesting because this is an actual visualization of the number of Facebook connections worldwide. Facebook put this map together, so I thought it was pretty interesting. And then when you think about how much data is flowing around the world right now, these are some of the numbers that come up. In the US, 3,500 petabytes of data exist in the US right now. A petabyte is 1 quadrillion bits of information. So 3,500 petabytes of data in the US. South America has 50 petabytes, 2,000 petabytes in Europe, 200 petabytes in Africa. China has 250 petabytes, India has 50, and Japan has 400. So you add all that together, and you think about all the other bits of data that are flowing around worldwide, globally. McKinsey estimates that there are 1.8 zettabytes of data that exist right now in the world. So that's everything, right? Now, I don't even know what a zettabyte is. I had to look it up. A zettabyte is 1 sextillion bytes of information. It is a 1 followed by 24 zeros. That's how much data is flowing around the world right now. And I'm talking about everything, right? GPS data, data from satellite communications, data from this, data from that. That's everything together. So you can see that the world is already drowning from the sheer volume of data that exists in the world. And then you think about us, right? This little family of loyalty marketers that's here in this nice conference center in Las Vegas. Where do we fit into this world? We're like a drop in the bucket, right? So that's not enough of a definition just to say that there's a lot of data flowing around. So IDC Consulting, which is a IT consulting firm, actually tried to define what big data is. And they came up with a definition that I think is kind of useful. At least it narrows the field for us a little bit. So they said if your IT project meets 2 of these 4 criteria, then you are involved in a big data project. So they said if you're trying to combine 2 data sources together, 2 or more data sources together, if your project is at least 100 plus terabytes of information, if you are involved in real-time data streaming, or if your data set is growing by at least 60% year over year. If your project meets 2 of these 4 criteria, then you are working in the world of big data. So you may agree with that definition or not, but I thought it was a useful one, and it does kind of narrow the focus for us a little bit. But it's still just an absolute crapload of data, right? And we still are not quite sure where we fit into it. So that doesn't even take into account other forms of big data that are soon going to transform our lives. So another guy that I like to read who's thinking about this kind of stuff is a science fiction author. His name is William Gibson. That's him there. And he coined this quote, which I liked quite a bit. He says, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." And what he means by that, and you think about science fiction, right? So we know that science fiction is a metaphor for the present, right? When science fiction authors write, they're not really writing about the future. They're using the future as a metaphor to comment on the present. And Gibson's point is that all the innovation that is going to result in the future is already happening right now, right? It's just happening in bits and pockets around the world, and we're not always aware that it's happening. So there's even more unbelievably mind-blowing transformation that's coming. So when you think about something like Siri, right, on the iPhone, Siri gets a bad rap because it doesn't really work as well as they promised us it would. And whenever you ask it something, it basically just does an internet search, right? So it's not really that valuable at this point. But Siri is an example of machine learning, right? Every time Siri is asked a question, that question is cataloged and an answer is found. So over time, Siri is going to become very, very smart indeed. And we can imagine a time 10 years or so from now when Siri actually does work as promised. This is kind of a joke ad that makes fun of Siri by introducing a concept called Siri Pro. So if you pay extra for Siri Pro, you actually get something useful out of it. But I think Siri Pro will exist at some point in the future. So we've got machine learning going on. Then you think about something like the Google self-driving automobile. This is an example of artificial intelligence. Now think when you're driving, all the decisions that you make when you're driving that you're not even necessarily aware of, right? When to speed up, when to slow down, when to merge, when to let another car in front of you, when to do this, when to do that. Well, Google is devising software that makes these decisions for you and makes them in a dynamic environment live at high speed. That's kind of mind-blowing, right? So this is going on. That's going to transform everything that we know about driving. And then you think about natural language processing. You may recognize this computer HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? And we know that in that movie, the computer could talk and sound like a natural human being, and it could also listen and understand what the astronauts were saying, and they could hold a conversation, right? So this isn't possible now, but it will be, and there are some very smart people that are working on natural language processing right now. So this is all mind-blowing stuff that, once again, is going to completely transform everything that we do, and it just confuses the issue further because we still don't know where we fit in. So we're going to get there. So data's the new oil, right? We've decided that. And McKinsey also said that this world of big data, it's going to result in about $50 billion in the big data industry by 2015. But the problem is, as I alluded earlier, is that there is a massive shortage of people that are smart enough to do this kind of work, that can communicate with data, that understand data analytics, and not only the actual propeller heads that sit in front of data all day, but marketers that understand how to work with data. That's a big gap too. And McKinsey estimates that by this time, we're going to be short, just in the US, by about 190,000 analysts. So if you have a child that is of college age or about to enter college, I would encourage you to encourage them to get into this field because they're not going to have any problem getting a job, right? So all this promise and peril of big data, it's kind of mind-blowing, but it might take a little bit longer than we thought because of this shortage of talent. So we'll see how quickly we overcome that obstacle. So we've got that to worry about. The problem is, and again, at this point, you're probably lost, confused, unsure, perplexed, just like I am, because I still don't know where we fit into this world. And I think even if you shrink the world of data down into what we do as loyalty marketers, whether it's data that we collect through a loyalty program or through a payment device or through a website, even at this level, the amount of data that we get access to is kind of staggering, right? The problem is not that we don't have the data. The problem is that we have too much data. We don't know what to do with the data we have. So we often feel like we're drinking from the fire hose, right? We often feel like we just don't even know where to begin. And you can be forgiven if you're a marketer in this environment for feeling like this every day, right? This might be how you feel when you get up in the morning and you're faced with trying to figure out where you fit into the world of big data. But flip it a minute and think about how the customer feels, right? So down on the strip, I encourage you to go check this out. The horror director Eli Roth has a haunted house. It's called the Goratorium, right? And if you walk through it and put yourself in the mindset of a customer, when a customer thinks about the world of big data and where he or she fits into this world, this is kind of how they feel, right? They feel like they're being tortured because all these offers are coming at them. There's all this information about data privacy and security, and they don't know where they fit into it. And they don't know what's going to happen, and they don't know what happens with their personal information when they give it. So customers are just as perplexed and terrified of this world as we are as marketers. And we're all consumers in this room, right? So we can all kind of put ourselves in that mindset and imagine trying to navigate this world as a consumer. So I would encourage you all to think about that. So when we think about where we fit into this world, I can imagine 4 potential futures for how the world of loyalty management is going to fit into this world of big data. So if you think about the classic 4-quadrant axis, right? On this axis, you've got the level of consumer control over data, because that's one of the tension points that's going on right now. How much control will consumers have over their data? In one future, one set of futures we can imagine that they have very little control, and another set of futures we can imagine that consumers kind of take control of their data. So that's one axis. The other axis is the level of emotional engagement and loyalty that we're able to build with our consumers in this world. So you put these two together, and you can imagine 4 possible futures, and I'm going to walk through them all briefly, and I'm going to proceed from the most dystopian future over to the future where we actually have a chance to figure this out. So in the world of low loyalty and low consumer data control, we might see a world of offer anarchy. I'll talk about what that means. In the world of low consumer loyalty and engagement, but high consumer data control, we might be in a world of pay-to-play. In the world of low data control, but high loyalty, we might find ourselves in a world of hunting for affinity. Talk about that. And then in the upper right, where consumers have a lot of control over their data and high emotional attachment to their favorite brands, we might be in the world of real relationships. So I'll talk about what that all means. So let's talk about offer anarchy first. So in the world of offer anarchy, the problem is that, as we saw in the chart, consumers have no control over their data. They don't know what's being done with it. They don't have the ability to opt out. And yet, the marketers, us, the people in this room, are not doing a good job of using the data to help build emotional attachment and loyalty. So in this world, you've got consumers that are kind of freaked out and frightened, right? Nobody has any control. The consumer doesn't have any control, and the marketers don't really have any control either. But the messaging is always on. Consumers have no control over what channels they receive the messaging in, right? They're getting offers on their smartphone. They're getting followed around the web by ads. Their search engines is tracking their behavior. Their smartphones are tracking their locations without them being aware of it, right? This is a pretty frightening world for the consumer. So it's always on. The offers are always deal-based because the marketers don't really know anything. They're not using the data effectively. They don't know anything about the consumer. So they can't build offers that have value or relevance. So everything is deal-based and based on the lowest price. There's low loyalty as a result, and there's low engagement with the brand. So this is a pretty dystopian future. So we hope that we don't find ourselves in this world because it doesn't benefit us and it doesn't benefit consumers. So that's one possible future. Then, just to kind of illustrate what that future might look like, I wanted to show this little clip. Some of you might have seen it before, but it's still the best example that I could find of what this future of offer anarchy might look like. So in case you couldn't tell what was going on there, right? It's the future. Tom Cruise is walking through this mall, and he's getting bombarded with all of these personalized ads, right? Because all the ads are reading his retinas, and they can tell who he is. So did it look like John Anderton had opted into these communications? Didn't look like it, right? Because he was running for his life, so it's probably not the best time for him to be bombarded with ads that are shouting his name at him. And then, of course, you notice when he gets into the store, technology doesn't even work well because they get his name wrong in one of the ads, right? So this is kind of the dystopian future of offer anarchy, and we have to be very cognizant and do everything that we can to try to avoid this future. Or else consumers are going to start feeling like this, right? We don't want consumers to get to the point where we have to literally pry their eyes open and make them respond to our messages because, as we know, they're cats and they'll claw us and they won't do it. So, in the pay-to-play future, you have a world in which consumers have all the power and marketers are kind of powerless to use data effectively to build relationships with them. And the reason why is because one of two things are going to happen if we keep going down this offer anarchy path, right? Either consumers are going to respond to startups that are going to come into being to help them gain control of their personal information, their data, their data storage boxes, data lock boxes, privacy keys. There's all these things in motion that are attempting to give consumers some power over their personal information. And if that doesn't happen, then we have the specter of legislation and governments telling us that we can no longer use data in ways that we would like to market to our customers, right? So in this world, data becomes commoditized, and if you want access to consumer data, you're going to have to pay for it. And it's going to be much more expensive, and the data is going to go to the highest bidder. And in this environment, loyalty is, again, going to be entirely based on transactions. Right? You're not going to be able to build any type of emotional loyalty through the data collection and analysis. So it's a pretty dystopian future for us as marketers. Consumers might like this world because they have a lot of control, but it doesn't help us, right? And in this future, a lot of us, and I would put my own company in this bucket, if we find ourselves in this future, we can see what it's going to do to our business models. They're going to look like this. We're going to find our business models, we've laid waste to them. So we desperately want to avoid this future as marketers. We want consumers to have control, but we don't want it to be an environment where data analysis becomes completely untenable because of cost. In the next future, the hunt for affinity, this is the opposite scenario. This is a future in which consumers don't have any control over data. We have all the control, but we're still not using the data effectively. We're still not using it to build relationships because we don't have the time, or it's too expensive, or we can't figure out what to do with it. So the problem with this scenario is that consumers are going to be continually brokenhearted, right? So they're going to go on a series of blind dates. And they're going to find that they don't have any control over the data, so they can't figure out a way to share personal information with marketers in a way that's valuable to them. Marketers are not using the data effectively, and everything is of high cost because we're still using marketing techniques that shotgun messages out to everybody instead of targeting messages by cohort or at a one-to-one level. The offers are all short-term and promotional. So it's just whatever the latest deal of the day is, right? We see a lot of that going on right now. And we find the customers are quite promiscuous because we haven't in any way tried to use data to build relationships. They just keep going from one relationship to the next. You think about the showrooming behavior that's going on right now, where folks can search online for prices in store. This is an example of promiscuous behavior. They have a relationship with the retailer. They walk in the store, but because of technology and because retailers haven't figured out a way to build relationships with these folks, they're willing to walk out and go on to the next thing. So this is a future that's very scary also. Finally, we have, and it's going to result in a lot of broken hearts, both for marketers and consumers. And then finally, we have the era of real relationships, and this is where I think we fit in. This is where I think our place is in this world of big data. In this environment, we do have efficient data usage. We are able to use data effectively to build relationships. We do get measurable return on the investment in our data usage and analysis. We are able to build sustainable loyalty, and we are able to develop symbiotic relationships where both we as marketers and the consumers experience the value of the relationship. The consumer gets value from us because we're using their data effectively, and we get value from them because they're buying more, they're shopping more, and they're telling their friends. So this is probably the best looking future for all of us because it works for everybody. So this is where I think that we fit into the world of big data. And if we're able to do this, we can build enduring relationships with customers. We can build relationships that are as eternal as that of Bella and Edward. We can build fairy tale relationships like Kate and William. And if that doesn't work, we might at least be able to build a relationship that's as romantic as Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze, right? So I think this is a good future for us. The question is, how do we get there? So the problem is that we'd like to get here, but the market forces are pushing us down here, right? And you can see this happening now. There's tremendous pressure on companies like Facebook and Google to monetize their data. And because that pressure exists, you're starting to see them do things that may push us down into the offer anarchy space. So I'm encouraging everybody to focus on real relationships. Now, how do we do that? Well, I'll talk to you about the script. Now, I used to be a telemarketer. This was my first job out of college. And that's an actual picture of me in the mid-90s. As you can see, I've lost a little weight. But I was a straight commission telemarketer. And when you're a telemarketer and you got to try to close somebody on the first call, you start to, when things are going well, you start to feel pretty good about yourself, and you start trying fancy things, and you start saying this and saying that, and you think that you're the one that's really closing the sales. But when things would go bad, you would always go back to the script, right? The script was sacrosanct. The reason why the script was sacrosanct is because it worked. It worked. So whenever you got out of whack and you couldn't sell anymore, you went back to basics. You went back to the script, and the script worked. So I'm here within the context of customer loyalty and big data to give you the script, right? If I can accomplish one thing for you in these 2 days, you will at least know that you have a script that you can always refer back to when you're trying to navigate this world. So the first part of the script is basic blocking and tackling, okay? We have to remember what the basics are. And I think Cheryl talked a lot about this stuff, so I'm just going to spend a little bit of time here. But the basic drivers of customer loyalty do not change. They will always be the same, no matter what technology comes along, no matter what market forces come along. And they were articulated by this gentleman, Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, 50 years ago. He gave us the fundamental drivers of loyalty. He said they were QSVC. Does anybody know what that is, what that stands for? I think I hear it out there. Quality, service, cleanliness, or we call it now the customer experience, and value. These drivers do not change. These are the things that make customers loyal. None of this other stuff that we do with loyalty programs and data and communications, none of it matters if you can't compete on these fundamental drivers. These are the things you have to do well. So that's where you start. Always focus on this stuff. And what's interesting is, I showed this chart last year, when we surveyed our consumers in the US, millennials versus older consumers, and we asked them what made them loyal, they gave us Ray Kroc's drivers and unprompted responses. They said the things that make us loyal are quality, it's service, and price, et cetera. So consumers understand this, right? So these are the basics. Focus on those. That's part one of the script. Part two of the script is focus on building relationships, because that's what we do as loyalty marketers. We don't make loyal customers, we build loyal relationships, and there's a difference. Now what we know at Aimia is that relationships are based on three fundamental drivers of relationship: trust, commitment, and reciprocity. And we didn't just make these names up. We've got 15 years of academic research and client work that tells us that these are the components of a successful, enduring relationship. So trust means that the consumer perceives that you have high integrity, that you're honest, that you're ethical, and that your brand promise is believable. That engenders trust. And we try to live up to these values through what we call our TACT data values. So when we use customer data at Aimia, we make sure to the best of our ability that our data usage is transparent so consumers understand it, that we deliver added value back to the consumer for using this personal information with their permission, that we give the consumer control over the information as much as we can. We talked about the consumer data control, and that we engender a sense of trust in the consumer for how we use the data. So that's how we build trust when we build relationships at Aimia. Now, the second component, commitment, means that the consumer perceives that the brand is important. It's an important part of their life, that their experience with the brand is worthwhile, that they feel dedicated to the brand and the brand feels dedicated to them, and that they feel a sense of strong attachment to the brand. That engenders a sense of commitment. And the third element is reciprocity. The bee and the flower need each other, right? It's a symbiotic relationship. This is a very important component of a loyal relationship. And that means that the relationship is mutual. The consumer feels value, the marketer feels value in the relationship. There's a high level of understanding about the nature of the relationship. The consumer is concerned about continuing the relationship, and the consumer feels that the relationship is rewarding. So there's a high element of reciprocity that's necessary. So when you combine all this stuff together, the fundamental drivers of loyalty, Q, S, V, C, and then you factor in the elements of a successful and enduring relationship: trust, commitment, and reciprocity. And then you think about the desired outcomes that you'd like to have, whether it's added customer value or longer tenure or greater share of customer or stronger advocacy and word of mouth. What we do at Aimia and our analytics teams do is we can actually measure and correlate the connections between these elements, right? So we can tell you by getting the data and examining the relationships that the quality of your products and services has a direct correlation to the level of commitment that your consumers feel to the relationship, and that correlates to longer tenure. Those kinds of correlations we can make. We've been doing it for a long time. So that's how we understand how to use data to fuel relationship. So finally, the question becomes, what about the data? How do you use it effectively? The good news is that nobody has quite got this cracked yet, right? So you think about somebody like Foursquare. Now they know where you are, they've got that bit of information, but they don't know what you do once you get there. You think about Facebook, they know what you like, because they can see what you like, but they don't know what you're actually looking for, right? So they don't have a complete picture. You think of somebody like Google, big scary company, they know what you seek, but they don't know what you found. So there's an element missing there. You think about television, media consumption. TV advertisers know what you watch, but they don't know what you buy. So nobody has got this figured out. But the one thing that we have as loyalty marketers that nobody else has is the transaction. This is the missing piece for a lot of people. And if you can connect all those other things back to the transaction, then you've got it nailed. So what we're going to be doing, and what everybody else is going to be doing that's in this space, is trying to connect all this other stuff back to the transaction. So we're going to be trying to connect mobile behavior back to the transaction. We're going to be connecting social media behavior. We're going to be connecting loyalty card information. We're going to be connecting web search. We're going to be connecting media consumption. We're going to be connecting post-purchase data all back to the transaction. And what you see as loyalty marketers, what we do is we start to build a data set that gives us a complete picture of the consumer centered on the transaction, but which includes the entire purchase life cycle from awareness all the way to post-purchase. We're going to start connecting all these dots together. And this is how we get a manageable data set that we can actually use to build relationships. So we're going to be trying to do this. Our competitors are going to be trying to do it. It's kind of an arms race. You all are going to be trying to do it. We're all going to be trying to figure this out together. And we're all going to be looking for examples and success stories and case studies. So that's what I hope that we get out of the next 2 days, and what I hope that we get continually as we work together. So that's the environment that we need to be in, and if so, we'll be in the world of real relationships. That's where we all want to be. And then we'll find cats and dogs living together, right? That's what we're all hoping for. And we're going to be in a world of happy cats. All the cats are going to be in a good mood. And the thing you have to remember about cats is that, yeah, they're finicky, and they sometimes act like they don't like you, but if you continually lavish love and affection on your cat customers, eventually, at a time and place of their own choosing, they will jump up on your lap, and they will purr, and they'll make bread with their little paws. You know how they do that, right? And we're all going to be in a nice, happy, healthy, long-term relationship. So that's what I hope that you'll focus on. Let's get our customers on our laps and making bread, and I think we'll all win in the long run. So I know I'm tight on time, so I will thank you for your time and look forward to talking with you later.